and a very pleasant Monday to you here, the 19th of May. Greg Sher with a titan of industry. It's not a label I throw around lightly, but it's an absolute honor to bring on Bill Lowman. He's the is it vice chairman of American Pacific Mortgage? Chairman,
but who cares about
it's all the same. Yeah,
right.
I've never been a title guy, Bill.
I'm not either. And
you know what happens when you have this is what happens when you have too many notes. That's why you get them confused. The lines get blurred. And man,
kinda
is that a great
kind of like life?
Kind of like the mortgage business, really.
Yep.
Right.
No doubt.
And you've been doing this for quite some time, since 2002. You've been a part of American Pacific, and we have a lot to catch up on. You're a top 10 retail lender, around $10 billion in volume. So you are carrying a big torch in the mortgage industry, which is changing rapidly. How are you able to continue succeeding?
I think you do need to be prepared to evolve and to change. And, and I'm sure we'll get to it in a bit, Greg, but there's so much going on right now that I think, we need to be prepared to adapt to. But, when I look back in the history of our company and some of the changes that we needed to make, whether it was around the financial crisis and leading up to that, the events of early 2020, to the events of now, where we're seeing just, massive shifts going on in the business with certain consolidation and strategic partnerships that are fascinating.
Well, it got scary there during one of those eras you just mentioned. I know for us at NFM, we were just getting hammered with margin calls and wondering where our next payroll was going to come from. And you don't have to go that deep, but how scary did it get for you personally? Because I know that your people mean the world to you.
Yeah, actually, same, Greg. And I think, when you think of the things that we have experienced during our lifetime, during our careers, let's say, whether it was, what was going on in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, what was going on leading up to, during, and post financial crisis, and what was going on, and what did we have to deal with in that March and April period of 2020. And I've told people this many times, Greg, that intense period from middle of March through, I'm not even sure when, I felt like we had turned a corner. Let's just say through Memorial Day, I don't know, was more challenging and more intense than any of the previous eras that I described, and probably for a couple of reasons. And one, I would say, as our company got bigger, adapting to things like that got more complex. When we were smaller, we could be a little speedboat and navigate, but we didn't have that luxury in 2020. But we had the same concerns that you did at NFM.
What did you learn? What did you learn from it that turned out to be productive?
I think since that period of time, we all have looked at the liquidity of our balance sheets perhaps a little differently. And that, and look, I will say we have always been conservative with our balance sheet, but when you saw that much money, that much liquidity going out the door in margin calls, it makes you rethink, okay, how much servicing should we retain, or how much, capital should we invest in production growth or technology, knowing that, if you have such a crazy confluence of events, is it going to create the disruption in the financial markets or the rally that we saw? And look at the times we're living in. I mean, don't we all wake up and think we could have one of those holy crap moments again? So
Scary. Yeah,
it is.
Sure.
It is.
I find your ascent very interesting. In researching you, Kurt Reisig, the founder, asked you to join him in 2002, invited you to run a branch. Before you knew it, you were the president 2 years later. And then after, 12 successful years, became the CEO in 2016. And so just to evolve in that way, and then all of a sudden find yourself in that kind of crisis mode, I mean, you grow up real quick there. I mean, there was a lot to be learned. For us, it was that you could work remotely and we could be just as efficient, right? And it sort of gave the employee their life back in some ways, being able to
Yeah.
see kids' games, not having to spend so much time in the car, which requires a lot of trust. Like some institutions are like, get back in the office now. They said that 2, 3 years ago. Some are continuing to say it. And it takes a lot to trust your employees. I know we love ours, and you really go out of your way to express how much you love yours.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the positions that are more metric driven was pretty easy. The ones that aren't as metric driven did require that trust. And I think, we've all in certain ways tried to bring certain people back in. And it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle right now, whether you
Yeah,
want
for sure.
to or not. And that, like, you would ask me, what did you learn? And I talked about liquidity. You brought up a great point too, because even before we were chasing margin calls, we were sending people home with all these shelter in place orders, right?
Yeah. So that was an oh shit moment.
Oh,
Born out of
we can say those words on this podcast.
Anything you want. You would have. How many curse words would you have already uttered if you knew that the gloves were off?
I would have said shit earlier when I was talking about the cash going out the building.
Yeah.
And that would have been the only one, but
yeah. So look, that crisis, that was terrible, and it caused a lot of change. And I'll segue into this moment in time because there's a lot going on in the industry right now, and I wonder what you think how we're gonna view this period of time with AI, with the moves that are being made with regard to consolidation. 5 years from now, is this just another moment in time that passes, or is this a substantive thing that's happening?
It's the question of the day, I think. And look, I think when you have, I'll start with some of the consolidation and strategic partnerships, whatever you want to call them, going on right now. I think, the players involved are big enough and good enough where that if and when I say we, any of us listening here, American Pacific Mortgage, NFM, if we're not paying attention, if we're not looking to see how we adapt and evolve, we're going to be on the sidelines in 5 years from now. Let's start with Rocket, Redfin, and Cooper. I think there's varying opinions on how if that will work. I'll just say I have all the respect in the world for Rocket. I have all the respect in the world for Cooper. And if there's companies that can make it work, they're going to make it work. And, and you throw Redfin in there. So, that's a chunk of market share that we all need to pay attention to. And then you see, last week, the lower Bovado move. And this is all, we're just seeing this big strategic evolution. And, I'm calling it a race to the consumer. I mean, you can call it the sales funnel. I call it the race to the consumer. How are we getting to the consumer differently for purchase transactions, especially? And how is that going to look? And for companies that don't, how are we going to evolve our companies going forward with this being part of the landscape now?
Has it changed the conversations among the brass? Like, do you bring these things up and go, look at this move? What do you think? Should we be in the same market? Should we be looking to acquire or partner with entities?
Yeah, it has. It has. I think we all have to be doing, it's so yes, to answer your question directly, Greg. And then, and then it's also looking at what are the things that we've done in the past that maybe have become obsolete. And I'm talking about certain, strategic relationships with realtors and local markets. And is that still a thing? Or does this bigger, more strategic trajectory change how we need to look at those as well?
Yeah. I think it's a big leadership moment for us as people that run companies, because we have so many employees. I think we've got 1,200, 1,300. You've got over 2,000. I know that. So a lot of them are wondering the same things. Like,
Yeah.
how is all this gonna impact me? And it's a big moment for us. I think this is an intersection as leaders to be as transparent as we can. I know that transparency is among your core values: respect, transparency, and scrappy.
Yeah. Fight for what's
Uh,
right.
yeah, fight for what's right. So um, it is a very interesting time for sure, and it does appear as if we're fighting to get to the consumer
For some reason,
quicker.
you've dropped.
For some reason, I've dropped.
Yeah, I can't hear you. I can see you
Oh no, that's not good.
just randomly.
I know you can hear me now.
I can't.
That's amazing, isn't it? How we go to outer space and then we land again. A moment ago, I want to go back to your core values: respect, transparency, and scrappy. Because the scrappy, that really interests me, right? Because there's the grit in all of us. Like, we've got so much grit in this industry. It's really phenomenal, and nothing replaces hard work, right? I
Right.
mean, there is no replacement for that, and for getting through adversity.
Yeah, and Greg, we define scrappy two ways: fight for what's right, and also to be smart with your resources. Um, and we've always been that way. But when you talked about grit and our definition of scrappy, one of the things I think that really attracted me to want to get to know you, listening to this podcast is, and I'm going to get it wrong or not exactly right, but you wanting to be or being the voice for those who aren't heard. I think that's in there
Yeah,
as
yeah, yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. So
And when I've heard you
yeah.
say that, and as I've gotten to know you, talking about that, I think that's what makes what you do in this podcast unique. And I'll just say that's why I'm really honored to be on this today.
Well, I appreciate it. Let's talk about that, because the NBA does great work,
Yeah,
and we certainly need them, and they are fighting our fights, and they do a great job. Bob Brooksmith and Marcia and
yeah,
Pete and Bill Kilmore and Owen, your buddy Owen. We got to mention Owen here. I mean, they do amazing work, but I often think to myself, hey, look, you and I, we're C-suite people, so call the C-suites and the managers 2% of the business.
yeah.
What about the other 98, which are the horsepower behind all the loans that we close? We wouldn't be anything without them. And where is their voice? Where's the platform for them to speak up and talk about um, disparities and things that are important to them? And that's kind of how all of us was born. So I appreciate you recognizing that. And then at the core of it, Bill, and I'd love to segue into this idea, right? Because you're running one of the biggest IMBs in America. All of us in the name of the consumer. And so somewhere along the way, I feel like we got lost we as an industry, right? Some more than others. Brokers are better, suing each other. Lost sight of the fact that the consumer is why we're in this business. So all of us in the name of the consumer, meaning let's just get back on the tracks. And I think everything we do should be with the consumer in mind.
Great. I agree. And I think, as we have navigated the last number of years, like you said, it's become more about, whether it's brokers are better or more about you're going to recruit my loan officers or I'm going to recruit your loan officers. And how do we get, you know, grow our production, not how do we best serve our consumers. And I think that we're at a crossroads there now, whether it's around approaches from mortgage companies or it's around how will regulation be approached in in this new administration.
Yeah, we
And
should definitely talk about both of those things. But you brought up movement in the industry, and so I've got a very clear vision on what I think has taken place, and I'll articulate it in a moment. But I would love to hear from you, how you feel like the game has changed when it comes to recruiting. Very high level. In a lot of ways, it's become a money game where producers have been programmed to feel like they're free agents. They're Tyreek Hill in a contract year, and let's go. What am I worth today? And it's taken out some of the authenticity. Now you've got some incredible people there that don't come back every 2 years, and I do too, and that's the bedrock of our institutions. But it has diluted, to me, some of the meaningfulness of the relationship between the originator and ownership. I'm curious to know how you view the last 6 years. It really got started in about 2019. That's when the signing bonuses first started to really get thrown around, 50 basis points and higher. In some instances over 100 basis points, which of course we all know gets paid back. No one's giving out money for free.
Right. And look, I think if there is a referendum on does that work or does that not work, I think, you and I know we've lost people for 2 sign-on bonuses and they've come back. So, did that really work? And, and it ended up being more of a money grab and the grass wasn't greener on the other side, or people that I was recruiting that we lost to a sign-on bonus and then they came back. And they went somewhere else, but then they're on the market again every 2 years. And I think the answer to whether that is a successful long-term strategy lies somewhere in there. Because it hasn't created durable solutions or long-term homes for originators. So, and I think the other thing, and you touched on it, Greg, the whole, and it has a little bit to do with sign-on bonuses, but the whole broker is better. And, a retail loan officer working for our companies and the resources that we invest heavily in versus them navigating, a smaller wholesale environment because they're, perhaps chasing a rate sheet, not a signing bonus.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk to you about that. So you're bringing me in so many incredibly meaty directions here. I'm going to try and remember. I'm taking notes as we go here. How have you been able to grow? I mean, you're a $10 billion a year mortgage company. You're in the top 10. I mean, you are one of the leaders. So what is the strategy that has enabled you to succeed? If you had to hone in on one or two things.
So I think, a couple of them. One, I think, our becoming an ESOP, employees owned company, has been a game-changing strategy. Do you want to become part of something bigger? Do you want to become part of something and have, a piece of the action and be, one of the employee owners versus, a short-term sign-on bonus, especially when become part of the ESOP, that's available to all employees. So it's not just you, high-producing loan officer, it's everybody on your team. And that has probably been it has been our biggest growth and retention strategy that, and we started that in 2021.
Smart, really, really smart. I can see that. It's not an appropriate word, but it's a handcuff of sorts. Like, it's very hard to walk away from that, but it's also generous of the organization to create that opportunity. All right, now let's flip over to brokers are better, because brokers, and that's been retired. We know that's no longer. Now it's brokers are best. Their market share is pretty substantial at this point, and and over the years, historically, the pendulum has swung. When there's a rate compression, people run to brokerage because they need the lowest rate, and there's not as much money to go around. When it swings back, people go to the lending side because there is a little bit more lax and less competition in theory. But this time, to me, feels different. And the reason is because I feel like technologically there have been some advances now. I used to be able to sell against it and say, well, you know what, you can go to the broker, but your file is going to be in the hands of 20 different underwriters, and you're never going to have control, and the technology is going to suck. Turnarounds are going to be in outer space. It's not really like that anymore. And so I believe that they're going to hang on to this market share, and that it could grow, and that we might look at a day when it's 30, 40%. I'm okay with that, by the way, because back to what I said originally, the consumer should have options, right? So whether it's the broker option, the lending option, to me, as long as everybody plays nice and fair, I'm of the belief, and I don't have a problem saying it. Great, come on. Like there's enough room for all of us. Let's just all get along and try and make every consumer's dream come true. I'm wondering what you think about the directionality of the broker channel.
It's not going anywhere. It's not going away. I think it is going to grow. I think, a lot of it has been attributed to UWM and what they have done. And they have done a lot. But, there's a lot of other good wholesalers out there, by the way, that are capturing and growing their own market share. And they are formidable components. So, look, American Pacific Mortgage started as and operated as a broker from, our first 6 to 10 years of our existence. And I mentioned the range because our transition was a crooked path to a mortgage banker. Our transition was a crooked path to success. We still allow our originators under certain circumstances to broker. So I think if it puts the loan officer in the best position to serve a consumer, have at it. And
I agree.
And share to them, we need to be better.
Well, you and I are both on the same island here. We're in the lending island, and obviously we know the advantages distinctly of all you get in the family atmosphere, and you're part of something greater, right? And that is one of the best things about being a lender. And there's just so many things that we have, and so loving what we're doing at NFM, and I know you love what you're doing at APM. I want to talk to you about loan officer compensation for a moment. I'm going to take a swig though, because I'm still hanging on to my Derby cold. So hang on.
Oh, wow. That was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I know. Well, see, that's how hard I partied. Loan officer comp.
Yeah.
So like when we look at our books, we've got some people at 125 basis points, some people at 150. But when we look at the average, when you look at various elements of the comp paradigm, we average about 88 to 90 basis points in LO. I personally believe that that's where we're headed. Like whether it's today, in a year, 2 years, I think the financial opportunity will still be as great for our branch managers through other measures that you're instituting now and that we're instituting now that bring down the overall cost to produce. And so, yeah, maybe there's less, but there's more of less, right? Because you're not spending so much on fixed expenses.
Yeah.
You want to share any thoughts on LO comp, and if you feel like it's going to be heading down shortly as a result of this direct to consumer movement?
Yeah, I think that is exactly why. I think when you go back to what we were talking about earlier, Greg, with the race to the consumer or these strategic partnerships that are creating this funnel and the sales funnel, that's not for free. And so you can't create these partnerships and pay 120 basis points in compensation to a loan officer. So I think the partnerships that are creating the sales funnel is going to drive down LO comp because the money to pay for those leads or those strategic partnerships has got to come from somewhere. So I think we are going to see it go down. I also think we're going to see some changes, fundamental change, some maybe not fundamental changes, but through this, the new CFPB or a no CFPB. I don't know.
Yeah, I think LO comp rules are going to be relaxed. So, I mean, there's two conversations here. There's two conversations. Where do we think it's all going to settle in terms of basis points? And then what's going to happen to that aspect of Dodd-Frank? I know that's being worked on feverishly now. And I don't think there's going to be, it's possible there'll be no LO comp. You pay people what you want to pay them. And if they're okay to take that, fine. And, what people don't realize is that when the LO takes less, the lender also takes less because it's all the lender's money. People think that it's the LO's money, like you're the one taking all the risk. I want to pivot into leadership. What do you look for in a leader?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I personally look for a more of a servant and a person that uses the word we, not I. And I think I can best answer this question by sharing with you an interview strategy that I have when I'm interviewing someone for a leadership position. I will ask, among a series of questions, I will ask them what their greatest accomplishment in their career was. And I'll be honest, I have my notepad in front of me and my pen, and I can tell you, I don't give a shit about that accomplishment. What I'm listening for is two words. Are they saying I or are they saying we? And are you an I or are you a we? So if the answer was, for example, I did this, and this on this specific project or initiative or at my company, or if the answer was we put together a business model where we were able to, how many times did you say I? How many times did you say we? And if you're an I, you're not a leader in my organization. And if you're a we, boy, we got to shut. You're somebody I really want to be talking to.
That is something I think you learn over time. And so
Sure.
you and I, when we first met, you were very candid with me about as an owner and a leader of your company. There was a time where you focused a lot on problems, not solutions, and you reached kind of a point in your career where you wanted to start being a part of solutions. And so I bring that up in the context of, yeah, that's how you are right now. You look for we over I, but that's a learned thing, right? And as is going from a leader that focuses on the problems and then pivots into solutions. So let's talk about that transformation and what it did for you as a leader.
Yeah. So when we had that conversation, and where it really stands out in my mind, Greg, was, when you're in that period of time coming out of the financial crisis, and we were dealing with Dodd-Frank, we were dealing with so many changes, daily changes to our industry, with not just LO comp, but appraiser independence and so many other things. And I just focused on the problem. I just focused on bitching about what the next set of regulations that we would have to adapt, to, and how it would impact our company. And that's when I was like, I need to change my mind. My mind's, I have to shift where my mind is on that. And that's when I became more active in the MBA, where I could be and put myself in a position where I could be part of the solution. That's where, frankly, I made a conscious effort to not make enemies of other leaders in the industry, but to make friends and to collaborate, to be able to pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, this is something we're trying to solve for. You and I can compete, but we can also help each other out as well. And so I began to network more. I began to advocate more. And I needed to make that shift, and I did that, like I said, around 2010, 2011, when we were just getting bombarded with shit.
Yeah, and I know that you give Bill Cosgrove some
I
credit
do.
for that. I don't know Bill at all, but I know that you give him credit for pulling you over to the advocacy side.
I do. I met him. He flew out to California. He and I met for about 2 hours, and he encouraged me to use my platform as a leader at American Pacific Mortgage to advocate for IMBs and advocate for our industry. And he remains a great friend.
Yeah, and he's another great leader in our industry from Union Home. And I know shortly after you made that pivot, you became the chairman of the California Association of Mortgage Professionals.
Yeah.
2020 to 2021. So what are you doing these days? I mean, you're a chairman. When I think about a chairman, I think about a guy on a golf course, but you're in an office chair. So what am I getting wrong here?
Now, I would have been at home, but I felt my computer here was more reliable. That remains to be seen.
That was a big mistake.
So I should have stayed home. Look, I am transitioning. have a timeline in my mind.
Bill, back up just a little bit.
Sure.
Back up. If you'll back up your body. Yeah, all right, good.
Oh,
The
sure.
the sound is better from there. Go ahead.
So pensive, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
You were really leaning. You were leaning in.
Yeah.
Were you about to go to sleep or get emotional?
Yeah.
Which one?
Go to sleep.
You were like, "Hey, I'm chairman now. It's time for my afternoon nap." That would be funny.
Look, part of our ESOP was having succession plans. Part of the succession plan has me, moving on to doing more things with family and things like that. So right now, other people are sweating more than me. I might sweat what's going on in the industry, but a lot of other people are working harder than me right now.
When you look at when you look at your legacy and somebody looks back to say, "Oh, Bill Lowman, yeah, he was that guy." How do you think that story will be told? What do you hope that people will have seen that you did for this industry?
I think, for the industry, I've not only been an advocate, I've promoted advocacy, that I've helped other people say, "Hey, I want to be an advocate," whether they're in my company or not, that they see the value and they want to, try to be a shaper of the industry. And that's, what I hope to see.
Yeah. You like sports? Yeah, I saw a video. I saw a video of you where you talked about the Mamba mentality. Of course, that's Kobe Bryant, and there are a lot of parallels between that grit thing we were talking about and the moment in time that we're in. Look at that! Wow.
In a speech.
Hey, listen, I love the shoes. I don't know what the hell's going on with those socks, man. I mean, what in the world are those?
Yeah, they go with the shoes, Greg. And and I'm more than maybe any other sport, I'm a diehard Buffalo Bills fan.
Okay. Well, you're from Buffalo originally. You then moved to Louisville, where you spent 2 years, and then you've been in California ever since.
Yep.
Buffalo is a great team. I love their team a lot, and am a big Josh Allen fan. I think the question is, can he get them over the hump? If you look at the AFC Championship game last year, and you look at the Chiefs, you could argue, hey, it's somebody else's turn coming up here. Now, maybe that's true, maybe that's not. Let's say it is true. Is it Joe Burrow or is it Josh Allen? Or is it Lamar Jackson? To me, it's Joe Burrow. I would, if I had to start a football team today, and I needed a starting quarterback, Joe Burrow would be my guy.
So look, I don't want to go too deep into this because I've talked all day. It's not whether Josh can get him over the hump. You got to get to an AFC Championship game and not give up 32 points. And if you do that, you'll get over the hump. If I had to pick a quarterback that wasn't Josh, it would be Lamar.
Interesting. And my take is, and I know you got a hard stop coming up here soon, so don't worry. I'm mindful of it. I'm not going to make you late for your next. I'm not going to make you late for your next meeting where someone may or may not be able to hear you.
It's a tea time.
The thing about Lamar, running quarterbacks, they're always vulnerable, right? And they're not the speed. It goes away over time. So for somebody that relies so much on their legs, but you could say the same thing about Josh Allen. The difference is Lamar Jackson is 6'1" and Josh is 6'5". I mean, he's basically a quarterback who should be a linebacker. So I
think it could shorten Lamar's career. I just will say he'll have a Super Bowl before that happens.
Did those 4 consecutive Super Bowl losses just crush you?
Crushed my soul.
I'm sorry.
I still can't. If anything comes on with a highlight or anything from any of those 4 games, I can't watch it.
Listen, I look forward to you handing me that watch Monday. Next Monday when I see you in person.
Okay.
This has been a real pleasure. I appreciate your time. I congratulate you and APM on your tremendous success. I thank you for your advocacy and being so approachable. You're a huge figure in our industry, and for you to be so welcoming and warm with me, I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
Likewise, Greg. I look forward to seeing you at conferences or just our catch-up phone calls.
Yeah, for sure. Bill Lowman, chairman, not vice chairman, folks, of APM. Thanks so much. And our thanks to Donna Chachevsky, behind the scenes, pushing all the right buttons. We'll see you again next Monday, folks. Thanks.
Thank you.